I belonged to at the time, I was one of the boys on the crash crew. And there was about 24 of us on the crash crew. And there was, at night flying, we only had half the crew out. And this particular night, it was my night off. And we'd gone to the show, and while we was at the show, there was a loud explosion. Well, we thought we won't get to see the rest of the show because our plane crashed, and we'd be called out. But we didn't get called out. But curiosity got to us. We went down to the line and see what had happened. And we just about got there, and my buddy says, "Well, what time is it?" I said, "Well, it's 11:30. Well, they're not flying this late." And he said, "I'm going to go on back to barracks, and you can, when you come back, well, you can tell me what happened, if I'm awake." So anyway, we started back to the barracks, and I said, "Well, I'll go with you then. We will find out tomorrow morning." And we got about, I'd say, 25 yards out on the runway, the one runway they wasn't using, the cross runway. And we heard a loud noise, and the plane sounded like it's in trouble, you know, pulling out of a dive. And in a few minutes, or a few seconds, I should say, we saw a flash, and there was something about 25 yards from us. It looked like a big tin can. It was one of our fighters that crashed into the crash crew, in our crew. And there was, I would say, probably a dozen or more killed, because those days you didn't find out what went on. You couldn't find out anything. You didn't know anything. You wouldn't tell you anything. And so I was one of the guys that got the pilot out of the plane. Donald Boak is a Springfield lad. He was on the fire department, and he was the one that actually drug him out of the cockpit. The plane was on fire yet. And of course my buddy was with me, and we both helped him get him out and get him away from the plane, because it usually the plane would explode and burn, you know, the rest of the way up. It was burning as it was. The pilot was he could talk to me, you know, he was all right in that respect. And he asked me a lot of questions in a hurry, and he says, "How many guys did I kill?" And that was one of the things he asked. And I said, "Well, I don't know that, sir." I said, "I just couldn't tell you that. And I haven't been over there yet, actually." And then we had quite a time waiting for the ambulance to get there, because our two ambulances that we had to service our base was right there at the airfield. And they were destroyed by the plane. Finally, it seemed like forever before the ambulance ever got there. There was two of them came in, and I helped get the gentleman in the ambulance, and then I rushed on over to where our line was at, our crash crew line. And there was two guys I saw on a stretcher. And one of the guys that was with me, my buddy, he was helping get the guy on the stretcher and take him to the ambulance. And of course, I had no idea who they were. Their faces were black. I mean, they was burnt that bad. And of course, I wondered, my buddy, where I drove the truck when he wasn't there, and that was his night to work, and wasn't mine, of course. And I rushed to see if he might have been one of his, the guy, my buddy. And I jumped up on the truck, and I just slid back down off the truck. All I seen in there was the corner of the truck, a skeleton. What had happened, the plane hit the boom truck, and I guess ruptured the tank on the airplane. And they said it had about 26 gallons of 100 octane gas in it. And that is bad stuff. And that caused everything to get on fire. All the trucks was burnt except one of them. That was the one, the boom truck that he hit. Of course, it didn't hit that. The gas didn't hit that truck, and the rest of them it did. And I lost my buddy there, and my working buddy. And the bad thing about it, the pilot lived to be the next morning to 0500 and died, and that was the end of his life. That was one of the saddest things I think. Well, to start with, that was a bad deal.
And Hawaii back then was just like a picture postcard. You thought you was stepping right into one when you got off the ship. On December the 7th, the Japs come along. And the first thing I knew that they was there, they dropped a bomb by Hangar 54, which was down on one end of Fort Island. And I felt it more than heard it. And I was brushing my teeth. I jumped up, there's a parapet they had around the wash rack and that, so people couldn't see you in your shorts when you was cleaning up and that. So I jumped up on top of this parapet. It was about 5.5 foot high and about 6 inches wide, just hung one leg over it. And I looked over on what we called Mary's Point, and here come 3 Jap torpedo planes. Now I'm on the top floor of the big barracks, and I could see them coming down, and I said, my goodness, we've had it. And we surely did. They come in, they dropped 3 torpedoes into the Oklahoma, and evidently they dropped some in there before that I didn't see, because within about 6 or 7 minutes, the Oklahoma turned upside down. But to go back before this December the 7th, see, before then, we had our gun emplacements and all that all set up. And the Japanese envoys come through on the China Clipper about Thanksgiving, which is a week earlier than it is today now. And when they come through, well, they quit this condition 1, put the guns away, took down the sandbags and stored them or whatever. And so there we were without nothing then when the Japs hit the island. And of course, one of the things they hit first was a harbor oil tanker that goes around and refuels the destroyers and ships in the harbor. And it caught on fire. And from there on, what happened on that end of the island, I couldn't tell you because the smoke was so much in that. But I heard the Arizona blow up, but to this day I can't tell you now whether it was the first wave or the second wave. And then when the Japs would strafe, why, they just told you hide behind something, and the closest thing to me was the engine test stands, and they're made out of that thick of stuff, so I just jumped behind them, and I could look out there and see them Japs strafing the hangar areas, and they got to the first person I ever seen killed was there, and our own people killed him, but it was all his fault. His fellow was firing a .50 caliber machine gun, and he was carrying ammunition out to it. Instead of walking behind the man, he walked in front of the machine gun, just like cut his head off. And that stays with you a long time. That night, we had a big show on that night. It was after dark, and some of the aircraft from one of the carriers that was out to sea, the carriers weren't in. That was a godsend for us. And these 6 airplanes were coming in. The reason I can tell you 6, because I was in hangar 39 watching them as they had their lights on, coming down the harbor. And they turned them lights off for some reason, and that upset some Marine or sailor or soldier around that harbor somewhere, and he pulled the trigger on that .50 caliber, and it went tut-tut-tut. And it seemed like forever, but then the whole sky lit up. Every gun from 5 inches on down to .30 calibers would firing up in the air. And I mean to tell you, there was the finest fireworks you ever seen.
Like the 4th of July.
You had to step back inside the hangar and look out the doors because all that metal was coming back down too.